10 reflections from my 8.5 years in business now. What's going on, guys? It's Pete here from Clinic Mastery, and I'm excited to be going through this with you today, inspired, of course, by Instagram releasing threads lately and me getting on that bandwagon. But before we go any further, please like and subscribe, smash those. It helps us to reach more people to make a greater impact. And if you're a healthcare clinic owner and you'd like to understand what are the opportunities in your business that you may not be seeing right now, just down below, I've linked in the Assess Your Clinic. Give that one a tickle, follow that along, and I guarantee you it'll be worth every second that you spend doing that. The report you get at the end is fantastic. Now, without further ado, let's get into my 10 reflections from my 8.5 years in business now. Now, 8.5 years doesn't sound like a long time, but if I reflect on where I started, which was in a small CrossFit gym on an industrial street next to a power plant and a scrap metal yard as just a solo physio practitioner, 6 weeks into being a physiotherapist, to moving states and still having my business run effectively for 9 months while I wasn't there at all, essentially, before being able to sell the business and continue to do work that inspires me. So let's get stuck into it. Now, number one, on day one, I've got some notes here. On day one, I thought I knew everything, and today I know how little I really know. And I think it's a really interesting thing to consider, because often the less you know, the more you think you know. And I remember right back to the start, I was like, do I get a business coach? Do I really need someone? Like, how hard can it be? I'll just do the do. And I never even saw the opportunities because I just didn't know what I didn't know. I didn't know that I could come off of the tools and have a clinic that ran without me, essentially. I didn't know that I could move states and still have a profitable clinic. I didn't know that I could actually build up opportunities within my clinic, pathways for my team members, for them to have ownership and for them to have a stake in the success of the business. All things that I didn't know early on and would never have considered had I not actually reached out and got some help. Now, number two, luck and randomness play a much larger role in success than most people care to admit. And the survivorship bias hides this in plain sight. Now, what this means is that often we attribute our successes to our skills, and we attribute our failures or our losses to randomness or just things going wrong, okay? But what we really need to be able to do is to step back and try and actually really understand how much of a role did luck play in this, whether it's winning or losing, and how much of a role did skill actually play in that? Because I guarantee you've probably done it yourself. I do it all the time. Is I look back with rose-colored glasses at the things that went well, and I attribute that to things that I did fantastically. And the same goes the other way. When things didn't go well, it was because of COVID, or that person left, or we had this issue come up, or is the clinic that opened down the road, whatever it may be. Okay, I hope you can understand that. And the survivorship bias that hides this in plain sight essentially means that the people who are successful, they're the ones who we see and we put up on a pedestal. And so it hides it in plain sight. We assume that just because you're successful, that you are skilled and you've done things really well, but it doesn't always work out that way. And even when I look back, there were so many times that luck played a role in my career. Very, very interesting. Now let's move on to number three. There are no good or bad things that influence business. Things will happen, and to the degree we label them good or bad, we will be forever controlled by external events. And what I mean by this is when we label something as purely good or purely bad, we're leaving ourselves open and our emotions, basically, that this thing dictates how we feel. Like, this is going to make me feel happy. This is going to make me feel sad. If we think of COVID, now COVID was a really challenging time for many, many people, and different people felt it differently depending on where you were and how it impacted you. But if you were to look at my clinic, all right, if we look at the negatives, the cons, it really hit us from a financial point early on. We had a massive decrease in new clients. We had lots of people who didn't feel safe coming in. And so it really hurt the business aspect there. And so you could label that as a terrible thing that is all negative. But what were the positives that came from it? From a team cohesiveness perspective, from an online healthcare perspective, there are people in rural Australia now who are still getting And because of COVID, better healthcare, better access to online services that they couldn't have otherwise accessed before. So there are positives to come from all of these things. We don't want to just label it good or bad. We want to look for what are the pros and what are the cons. And another one, if you flip the script and we look at you're trying to recruiting is quite hard at the moment. And you find the perfect person. Looking at it and understanding there's a lot of positives there, but what are the negatives? What are the drawbacks? You may have to spend a lot of time training this person, and you may not have a whole heap of time in order to do this. They may not fit in with your exact ideal client or your exact culture. There could be a whole range of drawbacks. So rather than letting the event of hiring this person dictate your emotions, whether positively or negatively, understand that there will be good things to come from this and there will be challenges to come from this as well. Now, number 4, the market doesn't care about you. You have to solve a real problem for a real person who is aware of the problem and will pay money to have it solved. And I think the key thing to think about here is often people create something and they love it. They're so attached to the thing that they've created. But the market doesn't actually, people don't actually want it. They create something that doesn't solve a real problem for a real person. And sometimes they create something that does solve a problem, but the market isn't aware of it, or they're not willing to to pay money to solve that problem. And so a key thing that I always like to think about when we are creating something is how can I actually discuss and talk with my market to understand what are the problems they're facing right now? What are the symptoms of their problems? How aware of it are they? And are they willing to pay money to have this solved? Because if it doesn't tick all of those boxes, it's not going to be very successful. Number 5, what you get paid is a reflection of the value that you bring to others. This was something that one of my mentors, Shane Davis, taught me. And I really struggled with this early on in healthcare, especially when we started to make some reasonable money. Because I started to wonder, well, am I a bad person for making money in healthcare? Should we not be making money? Does that mean we're charging too much or we're over-servicing or we're seeing people too much? All of these thoughts ran through my head. And even when I thought back to my childhood and my parents, we weren't so wealthy. And so when someone drove past in a really nice car, there could be a little comment around, oh, I wonder what they do for money. So I had these negative connotations around money, and I had to get over these and understand that people will pay you based on the value that you bring to them. And if you bring an immense amount of value, then you should be paid in relation to that, in direct proportion to that. And when I was able to change that thinking, I was able to feel better with actually helping more people. I actually stunted my own growth because I didn't want to make more money because I felt like that meant I was doing the wrong thing as a healthcare professional. Crazy, isn't it? Number 6, often we make decisions emotionally and then we rationalize them with biased logic, not the other way around, which can make us double down on bad decisions. So this one here is actually from a book, Fooled by Randomness by Nassim Nicholas Taleb. If you're looking for a really good book to listen to on Audible or to read, that is the one, my friends. One thing to consider here is we make decisions typically emotionally, and then we find the logic to back up the decision we've made, not the other way around. We like to think we make the logical decision and then we attach the emotions to it afterwards. But there's been a lot of study to really understand humans. And at the crux of it, we are emotional beings. And so you need to have a system in place in business to be able to check yourself, to have someone to objectively look in at the decisions that you make to help you to make sure that you're not making an emotional decision, backing it up with the logic that fits that bias, and then going down the wrong path. And that's where I think we come in as Clinic Mastery. I think this is something that we're able to do looking in as observers, as external observers. And it's why to this day, I still have coaches and consultants that help me. Even though this is what I do, I need someone who can look in objectively to actually help me to understand what are my blind spots? Where am I making emotional decisions and trying to cover it up with biased logic after the fact? Number 7, consistency is more important than sprinting. Play long-term games with long-term people. And what I was getting at here is that in business, too often we find this boom bust cycle where we go through a period of sprinting, going as hard as we can. And then we hit this burnout and we don't do heaps. And we find we do this consistently. It's not a healthy way to do it. It's not a fun way to do it. It really kills the joy out of it. So it's understanding how can we find consistency, a level that we can consistently maintain over a long period of time. Something I learned from a good friend of mine, Benji, who when I met him, he worked 4 hours a day, every day, no more, no less. And I thought it was a really odd concept. But the more I spent time seeing how he grew his business, the more I understood whether it rain, hail, shine, whether he had motivation or he didn't, he showed up and he did his 4 hours and success came. Which leads me into number 8, and that is being a good human is one of the most underrated business strategies. Don't be a jerk and treat people with respect. Essentially here, this is a continuation of number 7 when we said play long-term games with long-term people. We just want to make sure that we are acting in a way that's in accordance with our values and how we see ourselves, our integrity. Because I think it was Warren Buffett that said, it takes 30 years to build a reputation and less than 5 minutes to destroy it. And I think if people remembered that, they would think a little bit more before making some of the decisions that they do. And in business, how do you want people to think of you? How do you want people to think of your company? And if you're thinking with a 30, 40, 50-year timeline, that visionary type thinking, then I think you'll tend to make the right decision for the long term, rather than making the decision that may be the most profitable decision in the short term, the next 3 to 5 days, the next 2 to 4 months, whatever it may be. But over the long term, it's going to hurt. And compound interest of relationships, for me, has been one of the most enjoyable part of business, but also one of the most fruitful financially as well. Now, number 9, you can't judge the quality of a decision by the outcome. It should be judged by the repeatability of the outcome. Otherwise, we should put lottery winners on pedestals as successful entrepreneurs and business people. Now, what I was getting at here is often we make a decision, and if that decision pans out, we go, that was a great decision. The problem with this thinking is, like I said there, if you buy a lottery ticket and you win, does that mean that that was a great decision and next time you should do it and you should be able to repeat the same outcome? No, obviously not. I think we can all understand that. So just because we make a decision in business and it works out, we have to be able to critically analyze, even though it worked out, was it the right decision? Conversely, if we make a decision and it doesn't pan out how we wanted it to do, it doesn't mean it was the wrong decision to make. We just have to understand that sometimes on the balance of probabilities, you're going to lose out because things aren't often 0 or 100. Okay? Yes or no, black and white. And so the example here could be, let's say you hire someone, you hire a therapist for your team. Now, that therapist, it may not work out with them. 3 months later, you may go, all right, we're going to have to let that person go. Okay? They're just not a culture fit, whatever it may be. Was it a bad decision to hire them? Based on the information you had at the time, it's entirely reasonable to say that you made the best decision. That was the decision you should have made. And if you were to go back, given that same information, you should make that same decision, even though it didn't work out. So keeping that in mind helps us to analyze the quality of our decision-making. Lastly, number 10, learning from mentors is valuable only when you put the lessons into practice. Understand that a large part of the value proposition is accountability, and a business owner is often not accountable to anyone. This is why successful companies have a board of directors the CEO reports to. And I didn't learn this early enough. As a business owner, you definitely need objective eyes looking in at your business. It is just, for me, it's an absolute no-brainer. Now, large companies will have a board of directors that keeps the CEO, the director, essentially accountable. They analyze the decisions to help them to understand, to look at it objectively, to take the emotions out of it and double check all of the logic. But as a small business owner, that's where I would highly recommend having someone like a coach, a consultant, someone who knows what they're talking about in your industry, who can look in to hold you accountable to getting shit done, but also to make sure that you're not making emotional decisions and then backing it up with logic. And that person should be able to tell you the things that you don't want to hear. They shouldn't be a yes man or a yes woman. they should be able to have the hard conversations from a place of love and care to help you to succeed and to hit your goals. Well, that, my friends, is the culmination of 8.5 years of business. The 10 top learnings that I thought I'd share with you today. I hope they add some value to you, and I hope you get a lot out of this. And lastly, if you haven't already, head down below, smash the like and subscribe button. It helps us to reach more people, to help more people. And also, we have the Assess Your Clinic link there. If you haven't already done it, I highly recommend you give that a shot. I'll see you in the next video, my friends.